called the Wonder Years Gathering a week ago. And it was kind of, the purpose is that we would get insight on empty nest ministry and also kind of ask God what our next steps would be. And so I was going to have LaVon, just because some of you have been asking, just give a real brief summary of our time there. And then I'll let Becky take it over from there to introduce our speaker. So, LaVon?
Well, first of all, thank all of you who knew about that and prayed for us. It ended up being just a really precious time with the Lord, but it was also a great time to spend time with these women who were so mature Christian women and so real and honest and going through so much in their lives, which we are all going through. So I think it was obvious to us that there is a great need out there for us all to come together, and I think God's placing that in a lot of women's minds to kind of make that happen. But just thank you all for supporting us, and there will be more details to come. We've been kind of debriefing and thinking about what all we learned and who we connected with. So in future meetings, we're going to give y'all more details about what has resulted from these meetings and all these new connections and relationships that we've had. So just more to come, so just hang in there.
Thank you so much for your prayers. So I am going to turn this over to the wonderful Becky Dixon, and she's going to introduce our speaker. At the end of our time with Colette, we'll have time for questions and answers. Then we're going to actually have just a tiny reflection time and listen to a pretty song that fits it and close in prayer, and we'll be out of here by 1. So that's kind of the way it rolls. For those who are new, we'll have chances in the future to have group introductions, but we won't do that today just because of time. So I'll turn it over to Becky.
I am really, really excited to introduce Colette. She is just a sweet, precious friend of my son Andrew and his wife Lindsay. They've done life group or community group through church together and met through separate men's and women's Bible studies. And she, my son said she does Enneagram. She knows it, and she would be perfect because I was asking him more about it. It seems like all my kids have figured things out, and they're really using this as a great tool for their relationships. And so I was just thrilled when Colette said she was very receptive to coming to speak to our group. So she is from Dallas, went to Trinity Christian Academy. I want to know, for 14 years, she said, I guess a few years of preschool too?
It's called pre-K.
Okay.
In between, pre-first.
Pre-first.
They don't do it anymore, but I did it.
14 years, and then on to Baylor. And after graduating, she met her husband, Luke. They moved here to Austin while he was going to start a real estate investment company. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And she was a graphic designer and still does some when she's not parenting these precious children. She has Claire, who's 5, Charlie, who's 3, and Jack is 2. And they are just blonde and blue-eyed to the max and adorable. So I'm really grateful, Colette, that you were willing to leave them. And I must add that her babysitter got sick, and Luke is at home with the kids. So
that's good for him.
We're interested, and I'm really grateful that you're interested in sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. There's a running joke between me and Andrew that my life goal is to be Becky Dixon.
Oh.
That's true.
That's not why I invited her here.
I am honored that you even asked me to be here. I have been here for Thanksgiving when I had, I think, a 2-week-old. She hosted me for Thanksgiving, and it was just an epic Thanksgiving. So, thank you for having me. Okay, so I learned about the Enneagram a couple years ago and was just super intrigued by it. Took a test, kind of related to my number, but it was just kind of, to me, it was just a number. And so I decided to read Suzanne Stabille's book, which is great, and it's just kind of a generalization of each number. And from that, I kind of was like, oh, I totally connect with my number. But then I just kept wanting more, and I loved it, and I became borderline obsessed with it, and which you'll find is something that my number does. So I just kept reading and reading and reading, and have taught it a couple of times, taught it to our community group. And Y'all, it's been massively impactful for me. I would say that I was living my entire life believing that everybody saw the world like I saw it, which is not.
They don't?
No. Don't live your life like that any longer. So anyways, that is how I got into it. It's massively impacted my relationship with other people, whether I know their number or not, and with my husband for sure, and with my siblings, and I would love for my parents to know the Enneagram. So I'm just proud of all of y'all because
It tried to be so current.
oh my gosh. I talked to my parents about it and they're just like, you hippies down in Austin. I know, they think we're crazy. But Suzanne Stabile is from Dallas. So
There we go.
anyways, so we're gonna start and we're just gonna dive in because we don't have a ton of time and there's just so much. And I'm really just hitting the surface here on all of the numbers and what the Enneagram is and whatnot. And I know that a lot of you I've talked to have taken the test, which I'm just so proud of y'all for doing that. And I will tell you, it is okay to take the test and be confused and you have 3 numbers and you don't know what you scored. Don't worry about that. We're gonna talk all about it. Also, the test can be totally wrong. So let go of whatever the test said if you don't relate to it after this and just listen and it's a process and if you want to dive deeper, I have ways for you to do that. So anyways, okay, the Enneagram is so old. A lot of people think that it started in the past 5 years. I think it's gained a lot of popularity in the last couple of years, but y'all, when I was like in 10th grade, I read the Odyssey, and what is his name? Odysseus? Mm-hmm. He travels, when he's coming back from war, into 9 different worlds. Those 9 different worlds are characterized the Enneagram worlds. It's like, this is so old, and it comes from a lot of different religions and traditions. It has recently become more popular as it's become kind of modernized in like the 60s. And then in the 80s, a bunch of different authors came out and kind of made it more for the evangelical Christian world and Roman Catholic world. But I think that it has recently become super popular because, we are all told that we are made in the image of God, but that does not mean that we are all made the same. And I think that evangelical Christians, in a way, are kind of just done with just saying I'm made in the image of God. And I think it's so important for us to realize that we are all made so different, and that I tell my 3-year-olds all the time, God made you in the most amazing and wonderful way, but you are unique and different, and we all do things differently. And so I have to remind myself that all the time. And the Enneagram is the epitome of that. So anyways, there's a lot of different like personality tests that I'm sure you've heard about, like the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and stuff like that. The Enneagram is very different than that. Those personality tests are going to tell you how someone acts, and that is all it's going to tell you, which is great, and it's super helpful, and in a corporate environment, you need that. But the Enneagram, the numbers, there's 9 numbers, and I think each one is going to tell you why you act the way that you do, what your motivation is, why you... I don't think I have any more, I'm sorry.
I can give up one.
Okay.
Here, who needs one?
Do you need one, Betsy?
Yeah.
The Enneagram is going to tell you why you do what you do, not just what you do. And then also, it's going to tell you what you do when you're really stressed, what you do when you're super healthy, what you do when you are in a conflict with somebody. So if I'm living here in the United States in this beautiful home, there's not a ton of stress. Like when I'm talking stress, I'm not talking like the grocery store is crowded. I'm talking real stress. But if I live in a war zone, my personality is going to be completely different there. But my core motivation is going to be the same. So my number has not changed, but the way that I look has changed. Does that make sense? So that's why I love the Enneagram, is it just has so many different layers to it. There's a lot of myths about the Enneagram that I've heard like 25 since I've been here. You cannot be 2 numbers. Don't just let that go. If you scored 2 numbers equally, you are one of those numbers, And then if that number, so okay, here's all the numbers. So I am a 7. When I took my test, I scored equally with a 7 and an 8. But 7 and 8 are next to each other. I am a 7 and I wing 8, which means I act like a 7. My motivation is a 7. Everything about me is very 7. But a lot of times I can act like an 8 or appear like an 8 in some situations. But like, I don't wing 6. I don't have a ton of 6. But every once in a while, I will find that I am acting like a 6, and I'm like, oh, my wing on that side is coming out. So you can't be 2 numbers. You're a number, and then you can wing only to the numbers next to you. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, it will. Another thing, there's no bad numbers. And there are no good numbers. They're just numbers. And I like to look at the numbers kind of like colors, like a big rainbow. And like, okay, I'm blue, but there are a million different kinds of blues. And I'm a very specific, unique blue. And there's no other blue like me. But I'm still blue. Does that make sense? So I truly believe that this works and that everyone in this room falls into a number. But I don't believe that any of you are the same shade of purple. Does that make sense? Okay. My husband has major issues with that. He's like, the whole world does not fall into 9 categories. I'm like, you're right, because there's these subtypes. You could just dive into it for a million reasons. But trust me, it works. It really works. Okay, we're gonna dive in. Now, I'm gonna start with my number because I'm going to speak poorly about some numbers, and I'm going to speak poorly about every number, and I feel like it's only fair if I start speaking poorly about me. Have y'all heard of Brené Brown?
Yes.
Love her so much. Have y'all listened to The Power of Vulnerability, her talk? If you have not, I highly suggest it. But she says something. She has a quote about vulnerability that I'm going to read because the Enneagram. It's a vulnerable thing, and I want y'all to be vulnerable with yourselves, and if you want to be vulnerable with each other, I think that's wonderful. And so the power of vulnerability is huge, and so I'm just going to read this. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So, anyways, I'm going to get vulnerable with you about my number. You ready? Okay. We're starting with 7 because I'm a 7. So, if you'll just scroll through your little booklet to 7, and then we're just going to go around the Enneagram circle all the way back to 6. And I apologize. I have a little bit of a cough, so. And with 7, I'm going to explain to you all the different weird terms on your sheets there, too. Okay, so I am a 7. A 7 is a busy, fun-loving type. They're spontaneous, they're versatile, they get distracted super easily, they're scattered. These are your friends who lose their keys. They're extroverted, optimistic, versatile, spontaneous, playful, high-spirited. They have a lot of energy. They're super practical. They can think through things quickly and get them done. They oftentimes can misapply their talents. They can become overextended or scattered or undisciplined. This is the definition of me. You can be a jack of all trade but master of none. I'm a photographer, graphic designer, interior designer a little bit. I'm an Enneagram person. I'm a mom. I'm so many different things, but I truly don't want to be a master of any of those things because then I'd have to let go of all those other things. And so I chose to make money off of graphic design, but I'm so much more than that, if that makes sense. So that is a 7. They're hard to pin down. They're constantly seeking new and exciting experiences and looking for satisfaction. Freedom is something that is the highest goal to them. You will see each number has a basic fear and a basic desire. So the core of why I do all of those things that I'm talking to you about is not because I'm just super, super fun and exciting. I appear that way. But the core of that is because I am scared of pain. So I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to be trapped. And so my coping mechanism for that is to turn everything positive, to turn everything into fun. I oftentimes ask my daughter when I pick her up from kindergarten, did you have a fun day? And I'm like, I have to remind myself that she can have a great day and it wasn't fun. So things like that, that's just at my core. I feel like our days at home with my kids are better if they're fun. And that is because I truly want to avoid pain. My basic desire is to be content, to have my needs met, and to be taken care of. And I can put that demand on my husband, and I can put that demand on my kids when they cause me emotional pain or physical pain. My boys will do that. Anyways, that kind of explains where kind of I'm coming from on that. Each number has a wound, which sometimes you relate to them, sometimes you don't. And for my case, I totally relate to my wound. A 7's oftentimes had an abrupt loss of care. And I for sure had that. My mom went into the hospital for like 2 months when I was in kindergarten, and I didn't see her. And that was massively impactful for me. Also, 7s found in their family that people enjoyed them and showed them affection when they were easygoing, fun, and made everybody laugh. And I was third child, and that was the role that I played in my family. And it's so crazy that I'm still playing it today. And y'all are gonna find that with your wound. It's crazy. But also, y'all are all moms, and all your kids have wounds, and that's okay. Like, I'm causing wounds on my children. You are not the reason your children are anything. That is just life. We live in a broken world. So, just want to put that out there. A quote about a 7 that I wanted to read that's on your page. To bring closure to anything for a 7 forces limitation on the freedom that they seek to establish in their own lives and create for others. They're always positive, always hopeful, voraciously curious. 7s remind us that we are all alive. But the root of a 7 is because they're scared of feeling that pain. Does that make sense? Okay, so each number is going to go to somewhere in stress. And so I put the little diagram on each page. A 7, when they're stressed, goes to a 1, which means I become obsessive compulsive about my house. When I'm really stressed out, I just become super anxious about everything being right and wrong. I confine myself when I'm stressed, I do that. For growth, a 7 goes to a 5, which a 5 is more introverted. They're slower paced. They research things before talking, which I could learn about. This is fully researched, by the way. I did research this before talking. But a 5 is just they're gonna really read about something and then think about it and then act. So that's what a 7 looks like when they're healthy. The triads at the bottom, you're gonna have a triad and a stance. These are really interesting, but this is kind of next level Enneagram. So each Enneagram number goes into a different triad. So you can see on the front page, the head, the heart, and the body. So the 7 goes to the head. So I'm going to think, forecasting to attain my safety. So guys, that means I am back in my head when life is hard. I'm planning a vacation. I'm planning what I'm gonna eat that's gonna make me feel better. I'm planning my glass of wine when my kids go down. I'm always thinking about how I'm going to reduce pain in my life. Does that make sense? Aggressive, this is the dark side of 7. When I am in conflict, a lot of numbers withdraw. A lot of numbers will kind of attach onto someone and latch on and just say, I'm so sorry. My number becomes aggressive and independent. My husband's number does as well, as you can only imagine. So I'm gonna move independently. I'm gonna puff myself up in times of conflict, and I'm gonna become aggressive. So that's what my number does. There's 3 numbers that become aggressive, 3 numbers that become withdrawn, bless your hearts, and 3 numbers that latch on and become detached and kind of cling. Does that make sense? So anyways, that is a 7. If anybody wants to, do you want to raise your hand and say that you scored 7?
Be proud of your number.
And if
that stance, independent, was so true, but I put there, God has changed that.
Oh, I love that.
His
And that's-
word has helped me with that.
I love that. And that's a huge thing about sevens too. Sevens are your children who had to fail to mature. And some of your kids, I'm sure you realize they didn't have to do that and they're great. And then some of your kids did. A lot of sevens need to feel pain that was unavoidable. Like there's times in life where you cannot avoid pain, and then that transforms them. And so for me, that's been massively impactful, where I look back on my adolescence and I see so much 7, and then my 7 now, it's a much more mature 7 because I have been through some significant pain. And so that has created just a different way of being as a 7, if that makes sense. So, but that's what life is all about. And you're going to find that with all of your numbers, is that you are better versions of your number. So, does that make sense? Okay. I now can find my keys. But turning in homework when I was little was impossible. Okay, next number is 8, which is my wing. And I have a strong 8 wing because 8s are strong. Okay, did anyone score 8? Anybody? Okay, so you probably are.
Wing.
Yeah,
We
you're
talked
probably a
about that.
7 with a wing 8 or an 8 with 7 wings. You kind of just have to think that through. Oh, another thing that I'm going to say, I've heard almost 75% of you have said that you scored a 2. That is beautiful, and I love that. Most women score a 2, and they are not a 2. Mothers score 2s because they're helpers. They're ingrained to help. So if you scored a 2, you might be a 2, but I want you to listen to all these numbers, okay? Because I probably day in, day out look like a 2 with my 3 kids, but not a 2. I wish I was a 2. Oh, okay, so 8s. Our 8s, these are powerful, dominating types. They are self-assured, decisive, willful, and they are confrontational. They oftentimes have major issues with vulnerability. Their basic fear is of being harmed or controlled by others. You can imagine what that manifests itself like. They're self-confident, strong, assertive. They are very protective, resourceful, straight-talking, and decisive. They also can be egocentric and domineering. They don't do a lot of small talk. These are not the people who are going to use emojis in your text message. And they're not going to, at the end of every paragraph, say, "Love you so much, how do you feel?" No, that's not your 8. Now, I have an 8 wing, and I have literally trained myself to be a bubbly, kinder, less aggressive person. And so you probably will get emojis from me, but it's not like my natural state. Does that make sense? Okay. They feel like they must control their environment, which is very, very important to them, especially people. They sometimes become confrontational and intimidating. They're not afraid to say how they feel. They're not afraid to say how they feel about abortion in a big room like this. That's not a problem for them. 8s typically have problems with their tempers and with allowing themselves to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a massive issue for them. But a lot of 8s think that they are being vulnerable when they actually are not. The wounds of an 8, I have multiple friends who are 8s, and they have multiple reasons why they're 8s, but a lot of them had aggressive parents, like maybe parents with some anger issues, and some of them had divorce in their families. But I have a strong 8 wing. My parents are happily married, and I had no parents with anger issues. But I think I just created myself into being an assertive, domineering person, and I think a lot of times women are perceived as being, excuse me, there's no better word, but just a bitch if you're an 8. Yeah, but I think women in our culture are perceived that way, but women who are 8s are strong, assertive, powerful women who do big things and aren't afraid to upset people, to stand up for what they believe in. So I would love, and Susie Stabile would say the same thing, there is nothing wrong with an 8 woman. And when men are 8s, they're praised for being 8s, and a woman should be praised for being an 8 as well. So that's my 2 cents on that. Their basic fear is being hold on. Their basic fear is of being harmed or controlled. Their basic desire is to protect themselves from, to be in control and to own life and their destiny. So they want to control every aspect of things. Like they would care the way that the seats are in this room. They would care what's for dinner. They're going to tell you if they like it or not. And they're not going to be afraid of it, if that makes sense. No one, though, can be harder on an 8 than themselves. And in turn, 8s can be extremely hard on others, demanding more than is fair or realistic and making people pay for the ways that 8s feel betrayed by them. So I think in the end, when you look at an 8, they can be very puffed up and domineering, but they really at their core are not that. I think we're all just a little bit scared of being vulnerable with each other, and we all have ways of looking to be that. Does that make sense? But the beautiful thing about an 8 is that when they are in growth, they are the most beautiful people ever. A lustful and controlling 8 can become more open-hearted and caring and like a healthy 2. When they're at their healthiest, they are self-mastering and they use their strength to improve others' lives. They become heroic and they inspire others. And so an 8 when they're healthy is wonderful. An 8 when they are not healthy, as you can see here, can become secretive and fearful, which is not good for an 8. And they typically can have problems with their tempers, allowing themselves to be vulnerable. Their triad is also in the body triad. So I have found that the people that I know that are 8s, a lot of times like this involves like physical manual labor of control. Like blowing leaves is like the most magical thing for an 8 because they have full control over that. And I have a friend who will blow his leaves every single day after work. You probably know who I'm talking about.
I think I do.
Your son's neighbor, yeah. Working out is huge for them. They have control over their body. When their stance, which is not surprising, is aggressive. So when they are in conflict, they will puff up and become aggressive. So don't be scared of me after me sharing all this.
So their stress is 8 to 5?
Yes, so the stress you can see on here, they go to a 2 when they're healthy, and then they go to a 5 when they're unhealthy. And when it says it goes to that number, it just means you're going to an unhealthy version of that number. It doesn't mean that number is unhealthy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Next is our 9s, and I heard a lot of y'all scored 9. Does anyone want to raise their hand saying you scored 9? Oh my goodness! That is beautiful. I love my 9th friend. Okay. Now, 9s are so wonderful. They're extremely easygoing. They're self-effacing time. They're receptive, reassuring. They're super agreeable. They're very complacent. They'll make you whatever you want for dinner because they don't really know what they want for dinner. I know. They are very stable. They're very even-keeled. They're oftentimes creative, optimistic, supportive, but they can also be way too willing to go along with what everybody wants to do. They want to keep the peace at all costs for the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. They want everything to go smoothly. They don't want any conflict. If their kids are home, they don't want anybody to get upset with anybody. Confusing to talk with sometimes because you don't actually know how they feel about anything. Sometimes the best way to describe a 9 to me, and this is all in love, please know that, I want to grab their shoulders and just be like, but what do you want? Like, what, I want to know how you feel about that. And do you have an opinion about that? And that's, I'm coming from my number, which you can tell can be big and walk into a room and just have opinions. And so I think that ends up being the contrast for me with a 9 is that, but then they can also I walk into a room and I love that a 9 is just going to meet me right where I am. And they're going to teach me peace and teach me how everything is just wonderful because they want it to be. And that's beautiful. But I do find that a lot of 9s snap. And and that I'm not really the one that finds that. The Susie Stabile and Ian Crohn's and all these people who have researched it is a 9 they find can go about 10 years of keeping the peace. 10 years. That's incredible. I can go about 3 days. So, and they just snap, and it's anger that they snap with. And I've seen that in marriage, like a lot of marriages that I know, where especially if an 8 is married to or a 9 and an 8 are married to each other, the 9 just will snap, and it's not okay, and it's too much, and all of a sudden their opinion needs to be heard, and then they'll go back, and then they'll keep the peace for about 10 years. So that I always tell my 9 friends, what do you want? You have to pick dinner. You have to pick where we're going to dinner, just because I'm going to make you pick. So their fear is a loss of separation. So anything that doesn't have peace makes them feel that they might be separated. So they want to keep peace at all times. They have an inner stability. They want a peace of 9. 9s have learned instinctively how to self-nurture and self-protect, which leads them to their detached social posture. So sometimes with a 9, you will find they're not super engaging, but they're not disengaged, if that makes sense. They just want everything to be even keel. They don't want too much, they don't want too little, they just want status quo. So a 9 in stress goes to a 6, which a 6 is very anxious and worried. A 6 is terrified right now of the coronavirus. So a 9 would go to that in stress. A 9 in growth, which is so beautiful because I've seen this in all my 9 friends. A slothful, self-neglecting 9s become more self-developing, energetic, like a healthy 3, which our 3 is our achiever. When they're healthiest, they are able to form more profound relationships and be intensely alive and fully connected to their self and others. Another fun fact about a 9 is they need the most amount of sleep out of all the numbers. Interesting. This is something I love about a 9. So a 9 is in the body triad. They're very connected to their body. So they exert activity to gain control. And y'all, listen to what this looks like for a 9. That is candles, weighted blankets, cup of coffee, a really great show, just getting all comfy, getting your space perfect, and that is literally having your body in control of peace. And nobody can walk in on this peace, and this is peace. Does that make sense? Isn't that funny how we do that? So this is not surprising, but a 9 withdraws in conflict. So for about 10 years, and they don't.
She's gonna
And they literally go to anger. So it's like they are totally great until they're not. I've literally seen one of my best friends do this on vacation. And she's married to an 8, and she had it. And I think the 10-year mark happened on our vacation. And she went after him at the dinner table with all of us there, and we were all like, and y'all, 10 minutes later, she started her 10 years again. It was incredible. And he was just like blown away. And it was so impactful to him that it was massively impactful on their relationship, because she had never. And he just was like, I didn't know it bothered you that I told you where to sit whenever we sat down for dinner. But that she was keeping the peace for 10 years. Bless her heart. Okay. The wins of a 9. 9s oftentimes were overlooked and neglected and felt unimportant or lost. They were ignored or attacked for having needs or expressing themselves. They especially were suppressed if they had anger. They decided to keep a low profile and instead focus on the needs and the experiences of others. They sometimes felt unnoticed, at times neglected, and in order to numb the pain, they numbed themselves so that they were in constant peace. So some people connect with their wounds, some people don't. We all have different reasons why we're the way that we are, but that is kind of just a generalization of that. Okay, moving right along. Now you're going to flip back over to 1. What?
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So your description at the very top of 7 is the same as your description of the type for 9. And is that?
Oh, guys, that is a typo. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, that is not right. The description of a 9 is the easygoing, self-effacing. I'm sorry, that was probably so confusing. The receptive, reassuring, agreeable, and complacent.
Say that one more time.
Oh, yes, sorry. The easygoing, self-effacing type, receptive, reassuring, agreeable,
Hold it. We had so many times.
and complacent.
One more time.
The easygoing, self-effacing, receptive, reassuring, agreeable, and complacent. Sorry, y'all. I've looked over it 100 times. Thank
Three
you.
kids will do that to you.
Well, yeah.
That's
Um,
a good one.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, now you're gonna flip over to 1, which is at the very beginning. Did anyone
You know
score
what, I'm
1? Yeah.
hoping that we'll have time at the end for Q&A.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you need 10 minutes at the end? Just 5 or 10?
Yes, if we wanna do that, or we could.
I'm just wondering if Colette should focus on the numbers that we have, so we do have time for
Oh, yeah.
Q&A instead of,
You can do
just
that.
in case.
That's great.
Okay, how about?
Did
yes,
anyone
see if
score
it-
1? 1. And guys, I have a feeling that a lot of you that scored 2s maybe.
Okay, keep
Or
going,
one.
and if we
Okay.
get a number where nobody's there,
Then
then
we'll
maybe
skip
we'll
it.
skip that one.
Yeah.
Nobody was a 1?
We have
We have 1. I
Oh,
got
you're
you.
one. Okay.
Go, Judy.
1?
It was a tie.
It was okay. Well, ones, and if you're a 2, you probably wing 1. Ones are very common, so there's a couple in here that are not as common. So, okay, a 1 is a rational, idealistic type. They're principled, purposeful. They're self-controlled, and they're perfectionists. They are conscientious of ethics. Good and bad is a very big thing to them. They have a strong sense of right and wrong. They must not just be good, but they must be right, which there's a difference. Striving to improve things, but afraid of making mistakes. They are well organized and usually have a little bit of OCD. If you walk into their pantries or their closets, it's immaculate. They are critical and perfectionist towards themselves and others. In relationships, they oftentimes are looking for perfection in their spouse, which can cause tension. They typically have problems with resentment and impatient when people are not good or right. At their best, they are wise, discerning, realistic, and noble. And they can also be a little bit morally heroic. My friends that are 1s are, they do not go to sleep until the kitchen is completely clean, no dish left behind. Their basic fear is of being corrupt or evil or doing wrong. And so the good and bad, like life is very black and white to them. A lot of these other numbers, it's gray and all sorts of things. I wanted to read this quote because it's pretty impactful. The critical way that sometimes a 1 can come across can wear thin with people in relationships with 1s, but it actually should invite compassion when we realize that 1s criticize themselves from the moment they wake up every day. A 1 often will finish the most immaculate project you've ever seen, and everyone will be praising it, and they will just look at what wasn't perfect and what was flawed in it. So their basic desire is to be good, to have integrity, and to be in balance. A lot of times these will be your kids that they just always made the right choice. They maybe didn't make the right choice for the right reason, but they always made the right choice because they just want to be good. It's all black and white for them. This oftentimes in their triad acts out in the body of exerting control. So my 1 friends are very physically disciplined. They are in complete control of what they eat. They can OCD tendencies on a lot of different things. They will move towards others in conflict, and unfortunately with the 1, that looks like pinning out what's wrong in other people. So oftentimes they know what's wrong in them, and they think it's helpful to tell other people what's wrong in them. So, yes, they can become angry, critical, and but whenever they're healthy, they can look more like a 7, which would be more spontaneous, more alive, more joyful. And then when they're under stress, they can become a little bit irrational and moody, like a 4. Okay. Any questions on? Oh, a wound for a 1. these kind of make sense when you just think it through. When they were little, they were rewarded for being good and excelling. They were punished for being bad or performing poorly. They were the hero child who did everything right to help their parents. They believed that they would be somebody if their standards were higher, and they were nobody or worth nothing if they were not perfect. They can be as women, we can be very hard on our husbands when we are a one, high irrational demands, and just wanting them to be as perfect as you want yourself to be perfect. Does that make sense? Okay.
So question,
Yes.
I tied with a 9.
Type
So,
next. So
is
those
that-
those numbers connect. It's a circle. So
Okay.
a 9 and a 1. You
Because
could
that
either
sounds radically different.
Yes, it does. It does. But like I find a lot of my 9 friends, they will also have these just organizational OCD kind of looks,
Okay.
if that makes sense. But you could be a 1 and wing 9, or you could be a 9 and wing 1. So
Okay, got it.
you kind of just have to dig in and figure out. Super fun. Okay, half of my room, my 2s. Raise your hands. Look around. Okay, now I want you to really think about this, guys, because everybody mistypes as a 2, and I'm not saying I don't believe you're a 2, but us moms, it's just ingrained in us. We help, we buy presents, we cook food for everyone, and so you kind of have to really look at your core motivation. You'll find out soon when you see what a 2 looks like unhealthy. So our 2s, they're caring, interpersonal types. They're generous, they're people-pleasing, they're possessive. There's an Enneagram joke that Jesus was a 2. They're selfless. They oftentimes don't know how they feel because they just walk into a room and they're going off of the feelings of everybody else. They're empathetic, sincere, warm-hearted, friendly, generous, self-sacrificing. They're sentimental, they're flattering, they're people-pleasing. Every time I talk to a 2, they're going to go get a gift for somebody or do something for somebody. They're driven to be close to others, but they can slip into doing things for others in order to be needed. They have problems with possessiveness over people and relationships. They have shame in acknowledging their own needs. So when someone asks them what they want, they don't want to say. They feel shame in that because that is not about someone else. That they want everything to be projected on their love for others. Basically, a 2 would say, they wouldn't actually say this or thinking this, I'm not someone until I'm loved by someone. So I am such and such's daughter. I am their mother. I am his husband. I am a part of this group. So you're oftentimes with the 2, you have to say, well, what are you? Who are you? Their basic fear is being unwanted or unworthy of being loved. Their basic desire is to feel love. A basic fear of a 2 is that they aren't loved for who they actually are, but what they give to others. A 2 in stress, I see happen a lot. They become an 8. So a 2 would become extremely dominating over your relationship when they're unhealthy. I have a friend that is a 2, and luckily I can just say this and no one would know who this person is. And she will knock on my door, and she does not live in my neighborhood. She will knock on my door and ask if I do not respond to text messages. She will follow me into preschool parking lot to see what I'm doing and where I'm going. Because she has this anxiety about our relationship and if we are close enough and if she feels the connection to me. 2s oftentimes as mothers are calling their children way too much. They oftentimes their children walk into the door and they're saying, can I do all of your laundry and what do you want me to cook you and do you want your water with ice or no ice? So a lot of us moms will fall into that because we love our kids so much and we want to give them anything and everything that they want. But a 2's core motivation, not just with your children but with other relationships, is, am I calling this person because I want this person to deeply love me, or am I calling this person because I care about this person? Do you see the difference between that? So that's what a 2 can look like when they're unhealthy. When a 2 is healthy, they are prideful and self-deprecating. They will turn to being a little bit more selfish in a healthy way, and they will think about what they want and what their desires are. And I always tell my friends that are twos that are moms, it's like you gotta go take a day for yourself. Go cook a meal that you want that's maybe not your family's favorite because you wanted it. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about it too? Because
Are many men twos?
yes, and they're wonderful. They're I find like I have one of my husband's really good friends is a two, and his entire job is to help connect people in business. So he helps people find other people to work with, and he's paid to do that, and it's like perfect for him. Yeah, men that are twos serve their wives really well. They come home and will cook dinner randomly, and they oftentimes wing to like the three, which is the achiever. So a two's wound is interesting, which I wanted to read. Where's my two sheet? A two's wound is they had approval for helping and giving and not asking for much in turn. They oftentimes were the oldest. They learned how to be sweet, funny, cute, charming, and helpful and win affection. They held things together in their family. They're directly expressing their needs. It was met with an indifference or a disapproval or abandonment. You are nobody until you are loved by somebody. So, do our twos connect with that? Does anyone have any bells ringing? You're saying, yes, that's me. Yeah. Any questions on that? Okay. Did anyone?
You said that not as many people are twos as scored as twos.
Yes, you can miss.
So would you think that maybe our second highest thing might be so?
I would say you could be all over the board. I wouldn't even
Okay.
say that it means that you're a wing. I'd be interested to know what your secondary scoring was
Okay.
if you scored a 2. Oftentimes it's that number. And sometimes people are 3, but then because they're women, they think they're a 2.
So it's a 1.
A 1 is your secondary. So you probably are somewhere in there of a 1 or a 2, and you wing one or the other. So really, I'll say this over and over again, your core motivation, why am I doing the things that I'm doing, is where you're gonna find your number. Did anybody score 3? Anybody? Nobody. Okay, I'm gonna go over this one really quick. Well, okay, I'm gonna go really quick, because a lot of people are 3s. And there are 4s and 5s. Okay, we'll go quick. The 3s are success-oriented, adaptable, excelling, driven, and image-conscious. I guarantee a lot of your husbands are 3s. They are politicians. They're not actually politicians. They're politicians in a room. They're politically correct. They would never say anything to offend. They're self-assured. They're usually attractive and charming because they know what they need to do. They're ambitious, competent, energetic. They're status-conscious, although they probably won't tell you that. They're highly driven for advancement. They're diplomatic and poised, but they can also be overly concerned with their image and what others think of them. They're usually workaholics and competitive. They walk into a room and they can win it over. And that's subconscious. They're not trying to do it. They feel highly connected to you feel highly connected to a 3, but then you realize you don't actually know a lot about the 3. It's like this power they have. My husband's a 3, and it's crazy. Everyone loves and adores him. I've never met anyone who does not love him. But he is not going to sit there and tell you his heart's troubles. But everyone in the room is going to feel so connected to them. I have a lot of friends who are moms that are 3s, and that looks like wake up every morning, do your quiet time. My kids are doing their flashcards. They come home, like they have got it down. And when you meet with them, you feel so connected. On the phone, you feel so loved, and they're so great at it. But then you're like, I don't know anything about this person. And that's kind of just this front that they put on. Their basic fears of being worthless, their basic desires to feel valuable and worthwhile. When they are stressed, they can kind of just back off of all of it and become a 9. Their wounds, as you can imagine, is achievement is an approval was very important to them. It's interesting though, my husband never felt that from his parents. He felt that from coaches. He was a college athlete, and so for him, from the very, very, very beginning, he felt it from coaches, and he put that on himself through business and everything. So wounds are not always from the parents. Okay, type 4. Did anyone score type 4? Okay, we're gonna hit it quickly. Type 4 is a person who is going to walk into a room and just not really feel like they fit in. And that's everywhere they go. They're never really gonna find a place that they just feel fully connected to. They're sensitive, withdrawn, they're expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and a little bit temperamental. They're self-aware, sensitive, and reserved, emotionally honest and creative and personable. They feel out of place, like they don't belong. They can also be a little bit moody. Every 4 I've ever met thinks their childhood was far more tragic than it actually was. That's just kind of where they go. They're usually highly creative. They are the outsiders. They're the people who live on the east side. They are the artists. They are the people who just dress different to dress different. Austin as a city is a 4 city. So their fear is that they have no identity or personal significance. So they overcreate that identity, if that makes sense. They're the people who live in the bright orange house because they can. To find
Austin weird.
Yes, they want to keep it weird. They find themselves in their significance. They often felt when they were children that they were overlooked and that they needed to kind of do something to be noticed. They just, in general, they feel tragic and emotional. But there's wonderful things about them. They are the people who are truly creative, and they are the true artists, I believe. And at their best, they're highly creative. They're able to renew themselves and transform their experiences and feel deeply and greatly. You can have some really in-depth conversations with the 4 and really go deep and dark, and it does not bother them at all. So, okay, type 4. Oh, I'm going to read this quote really quick. It's frequently suggested that 4s are constantly looking to be rescued by someone who can see them for who they truly are. And I love this quote at the top. It says, "Go away, but don't leave." Right? Okay, type 5. Did anybody score 5? Anybody? Okay. I'm just going to go through it quickly again because I'm sure there's 5s in a row. 5s are intense, analytical type. They're perceptive, innovative, secretive, and can kind of isolate themselves. They ask a 5 what they know because they have read every book. And they oftentimes are professors, or like my sister's a 5, she's a stay-at-home mom, and she knows the best toy for all of her kids. She knows the best recipes. She knows everything that I need to know about the coronavirus right now. She sends me articles every day that I don't read. They are oftentimes introverted, independent, and a bit detached. Boundaries are just so important to them. And if you can learn this about a 5, you can love them so much better. And when I learned this about my sister, I just loved her so much better because they feel like people are constantly crossing their boundaries. Their boundaries are bigger and wider than all of ours. They overvalue independence. You're not going to hear from them a lot. They're not going to just text you to see how you're doing, but they really appreciate it if you text them. They avoid spontaneity at all costs. That is no joy. That is a complete threat to their life. They're masters of research and finding out more information, but that can also paralyze them where they do not make decisions because it has not been fully researched. So, this true story, my sister, speaking of the coronavirus, I had gone to Costco and just bought a couple things like diapers because who wants to run out of diapers in the middle of a lockdown? And she sends me a text and says, "I found this cookbook about if there was a zombie apocalypse." And it actually has some really good staples that we could buy if it happened. And I was like, "Well, have you bought anything?" She was like, "No." And I was like, "So you have figured out a cookbook that you need to maybe buy and read, but you have not actually bought anything." And this is a typical 5. They just want to research, but then they have that trouble acting. Does that make sense? Wounds of a 5 is so interesting to think of my sister as a 5 because this was so my parents with her. Because she was so introverted, they crossed her boundaries all the time and would just walk into her room, which I never cared. My mom would just barge in and just be like, "What are you doing?" And she just hated that. But for me, it didn't matter. For her, it was really, bothered her a lot and made her feel very, very intrusive. And so 5s oftentimes experience their parental figures were either being too intrusive or too aloof and depriving. They didn't experience their environments as empathetic. And so, anyways, I'll skip over that since we don't have any 5s. But anyways, you probably have children that are
Yeah,
5s.
it's good to know.
Your husband, yeah. Gosh, and if I'm so far from a 5 that if I know that someone is a 5, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna tone it down. I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna just listen. I'm not gonna ask a lot of questions. I'm not gonna text you every day. So it's just good to know. They're in the head triad because they're forecasting to attain safety by research. They are literally researching to prevent
Zombie
everything.
apocalypse.
Yes. And their stance, which is not surprising, is to withdraw. So they're just gonna back up in conflict. Type 6, and then we've done them all, and then we'll just talk all about it. Type 6 is 50% of the population, y'all. So type 6 is super important. So they are committed, security oriented, engaging, responsible. They're anxious and they're very suspicious. This is 50% of the population. Our marketing in the United States really taps into this fear-based with some ads. Like, think about retirement. I don't have enough money. Termites, they are taking over my house. Regular chicken is not good. We need to go get different chicken. Organic is not organic. I need to go get organic, but then I need to rinse it. I need to get it from the farm. Like, it's just anxious, worried, and a lot of Americans are this, and people tap into that. But they're also so reliable. They're hardworking. They're loyal, responsible, and trustworthy. They love being a part of groups. They love being a part of teams. They love the group atmosphere. A 6, they are not going to make a ton of decisions unless they've talked to kind of their core group. So their best friend, their husband, their kids. My mom is a 6, and before she does anything, she calls me and asks me about it, and then she's like, I don't ask anyone before I do stuff, and so I get really annoyed by it. But now that I know she's a 6, I'm like, I'm one of her core people, and she just has to ask me, and this is what she has to do. They can be a bit indecisive and cautious. They self-doubt and they're suspicious. They don't trust themselves. At their best, they are stable and self-reliant. So at their best, they trust themselves. They can kind of feed through ads and feed through the news and know that life, as they know it, is not over. Their basic fear is of being without support or guidance. Their basic desire is to have security and support. A lot of people would say that a 6 had something unsafe happen to them when they were a child. That does not mean something hugely traumatic. It could have been, they got robbed when they were 3 without being home, and it just never left that child's mind. So it doesn't have to be something crazy. It's how psychology works, that you can there's a trigger moment, and then that's you for the rest of your life. They are in the head triad, forecasting to attain safety. So what that looks like, it's so interesting because like a 7 is trying to plan fun, to keep fun. A 5 is trying to research so that everything that they do is figured out. And then the 6 is trying to literally go to Costco and buy everything for the coronavirus. Does that make sense? So it's like they're all in the head triad, but they're all doing it differently. And it's all just self-protection, and it's all based on fear. The stance is they become dependent. They don't trust themselves. So in something happening, they're going to cling on to someone and say, well, what do you think? Well, how do you think this is going to go down? So does that make sense?
50% of the
50%,
population.
I know. And 6s are really interesting because they kind of go into 2 different groups. If you're a 6 in this room and you've made it through life this far, you are in one group. The other side of the 6 is these people that are like, and this has no relation to this part of 6, so please note that these 2 6s are totally different. But like Hitler was a very, 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 very fearful 6. People who will come into a movie theater and shoot people, they are acting out of fear, and they are these very like irrational, psychotic fear. So you can, when you're a 6, you can go to this very healthy, normal, just anxious fear that can cope and deal and go to a healthy place. And there's this little tiny subset that is a very, very unhealthy 6. Does that make sense? I hesitate even bringing that up because there's nothing wrong with being a 6. It's just those people who did that in history, they weren't, they oftentimes, it was totally based out of fear. So I want to read this real quick about a 6. 6s doubt themselves, looking to an external authority or outside sources to remind them what they hope for and fundamentally know and what is true about themselves. Okay, before we open it up to discussion, which I think
Yeah, I think we're gonna save a song we were gonna do just
Okay.
to reflect on. We'll do it another time. We're
Okay.
good. We got it all ready to go. So.
I just wanted to close out with this, and then if we have time to
Yeah.
discuss, we will or we won't. The Enneagram is so great, and there's so much that you can learn, and that this is just skimming the surface. But if you want to dive deeper into it, I want you to know that if you can find out your sin patterns and why you do what you do. I mean, that's the great question of sin. Why do I keep doing what I do not want to do? But we are not all doing the same thing. We are all doing different things that we do not want to do. So if you can find out, why am I doing the thing that I don't want to do? This kind of says, oh, I'm afraid of pain. That's why I keep doing what I want to do. Oh, I'm afraid that things are going to become unsafe. You can have this deep connection with yourself and with others and with God, knowing that, Lord, I surrender this fear that I have, and I'm not asking it to go away because I know that I live in a simple, broken world. But if I can deal with my specific constant sin, then how much better can you be connected in conversation with the Lord? So I think that is so beautiful. Also, if you can find out your spouse's number, oh Lord, it is so helpful. And if you can find out your children's number, and if your kids can just tell you, I'm a da-da-da, and then you can just go get a book and read that part, if that's all you have time for, then gosh, you can love them so much better. Because my sweet mom, I mean, loving me and loving my sister and loving my brother, that is 3 different ways to love. And if she can figure that out, oh my gosh. I don't know what my kids are yet, but I can't wait to figure out. On the last page, these are 3 different books. They're kind of in order of what you should read them, if that makes sense. The very first book you should read is The Road Back to You. That is a very generalization of the Enneagram. The second book, The Path Between Us, is written by the same woman, Suzanne Stabile. That is going to tell you how to relate to all the numbers. So my friend's a 9, how do I love my 9s, you know? Becoming Us is also really great. It's about the Enneagram in marriage, which is super helpful. And then if you are geeking out and loving this so much, the Sacred Enneagram is next level, and it's real good, but you got to read it real slow because it's a lot. Websites that just have really good information is the Enneagram Institute, which I think that's where most of y'all took your test from. And then podcasts. In my phase of life, I do so many dishes. Podcasts are amazing. And the Typology podcast is by the guy who helped write that first book. And so that's a really great. If you think you know your number, go listen to one of those podcasts about that number, because each one's about a different number. And you'll just hear someone talking about their struggles, and you'll just be like, oh, that's me. That's me. So, anyways, I hope that y'all geek out over it.
So if y'all have any questions, now would be a time to take a couple minutes, and then we'll close this up. So don't be shy. Yes.
I was going to say, Colette, I know I was able to go to Suzanne Sabile's 9-day or seminar for Covenant Presbyterian. And so this, to take the test, works for the scenario. But her big thing is there's no test.
Yes, I totally agree.
You can't take a test to figure out what you are. You have to self-discover it.
Yes.
And her book is really good because it goes through all the nuances and all the descriptions of all the numbers. So, so I don't think we should be discouraged or think, oh gosh, I don't think I am what I tested. It makes sense.
Yeah, I tested a 6, and I'm not a 6 at all. And when you answer the questions on the test, you are answering it. Are you answering it for like how you act with your family, how you act with your good friends, how you act and how I act? I've never met any of you. How am I acting now? Like that, I look different in different scenarios. So I'm weary of the test. I think the test is great, but it's really just kind of to jumpstart you. But I think you really got to dig in if you want to. Sometimes it takes 6 months before you figure it out. But
I would share that I asked my daughter-in-law, who's good friends with Colette, what was your biggest takeaway from doing this? And I think it was just really, she said, she had never considered the fact, she's a 2 helper. She said, I'd never considered the fact that not everyone saw the world as a field where you could go and be a helper, you know, to be an assistant, to look for those ways. She said it was unbelievable to finally understand that that some people don't even see the world that way. Just opening her eyes to new ways of connecting to people. So,
And I think Lindsay would say, and I think she'd be totally great with me sharing this, is that she oftentimes with Andrew would not understand why Andrew isn't looking at all moments to serve her. And Andrew's not a 2. Andrew's a 6. And so for Lindsay to create stability in their house and like a safe environment for Andrew is just wonderful. So
yeah, they've definitely grown through
yeah.
knowing and understanding what their motivators are, but I don't need to interrupt.
Yeah.
So.
So we're in the process of trying to figure out where like everyone in our family is.
That's
and,
so
like,
fun.
Where we go to stress is like that other number like, of somebody in our family. But what does it mean? Because I think a lot of us wing out.
Yes.
So if you're your dominant number and you wing out, you still stay with your triad, right? As
Yes.
your dominant number.
So your wing is not your number at all. It's just going to be the way that you can act sometimes. It's not your core motivation. You should not relate to the core. Like I do not have any issue with being controlled, which is an 8. But I sometimes will act like an 8. Does that make sense? Like my core motivation is my 7, and that I am a 7. So I even tell people oftentimes, like, do not worry about your wing whatsoever. Figure out what number you are, and there are going to be times in your life where you go to one side, and then 10 years later you find you're really going to the other side, and you'll alternate back and forth, but you're going to stick with your number. And your number does not change. Your whole life, your number will not change.
So Colette, one clarifying question. When I took your test, I've taken others, I was like 2, 7, 3, 8. But, so does that mean I look between the 2 and the 7? Because I was expecting to be 2, 3.
Yeah.
That's been but that didn't have anything to do with the wing, the way your test turned
No,
out.
like you want to find your number. Oftentimes if your numbers that your top 2 that you scored, if they're next to each other, that means you're probably one of those
One
numbers.
of those 2, okay.
But if you're scoring 2 numbers that are not close to each other, I think you just have to dig in and figure out what you relate to.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Have you heard Enneagrams
Yeah,
podcast?
yeah.
Okay.
She's a 7.
Yes,
Love
she is
her.
a total 7,
Yeah.
but she did a whole summer of the Enneagram numbers, and she
Yes.
had a male and a female of each number
Yes,
on there.
so interesting.
That is really interesting
Yeah.
because it does. I think
looks
it looks
different.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is helpful to hear actual people talking about how they act and respond
Yes.
to different things. It kind of clicks a little bit
For
more
sure.
than
And what you do, like a 3 stay-at-home mom looks so different than a 3
Yes.
of like a corporate businessman, you know?
Yeah.
So,
How about one more and then we'll have to close up here. And if you have more questions afterwards, I'm
Yes.
going to call out your
Yeah.
time's like.
I could talk about this all
Kathy,
day.
did you have a?
I'm just curious, like you said, typically our oldest child is this number. Do they find that like the youngest child, and a lot of times they'll find is a 6?
Yes, I wouldn't like stick to that, but I think oftentimes like a last child is a lot of times a 7, which would be like an entertainer or a just kind of creates a positive outlook. A lot of girls that are firstborn, if you have any girls that are firstborn, you'll find that they take care of everything, so they're 2s or 1s, they do everything perfect. So stuff like that. A lot of firstborn boys are 3s because parents push them to achieve. So stuff like that. But a lot of middle child would be a 4 or a 5. They kind of get lost in the shuffle and feel unseen or unnoticed. But it doesn't always pan out like that. But I have seen it a lot. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have someone over here have a question? No? Okay.
Colette, we just want to thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Yeah.